So why don't we start actually by me showing you Scott Spencer's project. So we go into Lightbox. We're in project, and where did he put it? I'm looking for, if anybody can remember, give me a shout out. This is my presentations. I'm looking for his image plane. Let me make sure I'm in ZBrush 4R5, yeah.
I believe it's in grids, right?
What's that?
I believe it's in grids.
It is in grids, thanks.
If I remember.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, guys, my brain left me. I'm sitting here staring at this long list of things I'm talking about. Thanks, Daniel. All right, grids. And grids are going to relate to, in draw mode, this little, it's not little, this long thing they have down here. And this is going to help us talk about a couple of things in the interface, including measurements, hopefully. So let's just come into grids. Scott Spencer human. Load that. It's opening or it's closing. All right, guys. Let's do this all over again. Let's load a default sphere. You are learning from a professional. Go to your Lightbox, load a default sphere. That's going to set you up, okay? Because Pixologic's doing something. They're setting up the grid and all of that stuff kind of after the fact. Now we can go into Lightbox, Grid, Scott Spencer, and double-click that. And basically what this grid project is doing, or what grids are doing, is it's coming from Lightbox and it's going into your draw folder. And inside your draw folder, it's coming all the way down to this section here. It's going to adjust fill mode. Elevation stays the same. And it's going to add these two images, left, right, and it'll also add a front, back, and an up, down. So you can use grids to do that. You can also save grids right here. So you could create your own grids that you have. But we can also be using this to kind of import our own imagery. Now the cool thing about this is if you come in, you start working with not transparency but fill mode, you can see you've got some different options in here. Okay, set your fill mode to 3, turn perspective off, and this is really neat. Notice how wherever your point is, it is pulling to some point in your image. So you can even use perspective, and that perspective is going to adjust. Now before, a lot of times when you used image planes, you weren't able to use perspective because, well, there were just issues. You would use perspective or you'd have to adjust perspective. Things would become kind of problematic. But now I can switch over to the move brush. I can start pulling that out and down until it's roughly there. All right. Pull this in. Can even do this in 3/4 view because I'm just looking for where that blue looking for where this blue dot goes, and you see there's a little bit of space in there. It's nice, it's cool, it's a great way to kind of quickly define form. And it's different than, say, turning perspective off and lining this up. We have this technique, but now we've got this other one where we can use these lines. Switch over to our clay buildup. Now this clay buildup brush, I can see, all right, well, external angle, I'm going to come down, zygomatic. It's pretty cool. We can come into draw and adjust that fill mode. And we can literally use both sides of this. It's kind of hard to see this, but there we go. I'm using clay brush. I'm pushing back in space until I reach where that image should be. Even though nothing is in perspective right now, I'm still able to, in proper perspective, I mean, I'm still able to use these images and just keep an eye on where those dots are going. How many people have used this already? Give me a shout out if you've used grids. I'd love to hear what you think about it. Yeah, now one thing to note about this stuff, at least in my view, is that no matter what, you're going to have to rely on knowledge at a certain point, and you're going to have to start to just make assumptions. I don't know how to say this, but if you're, you know, we're all artists here, so I'm sure this is going to resonate with you guys. You only draw what you know. I forget who coined that phrase, but man, is it true. If you don't know something, you can't draw it, you know. And drawing is in and of itself an act of knowing. It's an act of learning. And in a lot of ways, when you're inside ZBrush, this is drawing. I mean, basically, I'm on this flat plane, and I'm just moving around in space. I have this weird ability to rotate my drawing within the paper, but ZBrush is really drawing. Okay, so this is cool. How do you do this? How do you set this up yourself? Let me open up a tray. I'm going to go into the palette, click this little swatch, and drag it over to the side. And let's just make sure we understand how this thing works a little. So first, the anatomy of this is that your views are in front, back, up, down, left, and right. So the bulk of your work is there. Fill mode has to do with transparency or really display. Just how is it displayed? Grid size is relevant because it is quite literally how big is this display. I'll demonstrate that, but there's going to be a conceptual problem that happens with you. As I start talking about grid size and you start working with your model and you bring something from Maya or Max or whatnot, problems can start to happen where the sizes don't match up with your grid. Just save that kind of problem for a little while. If it happens, email us or catch us in a hangout. I can help you work through it. But otherwise, just try to not focus too much on it and on getting things perfectly lined up. I will have a class on that. Okay, tiles are how many of these little guys show up. Okay, so that's useful for measurement. Scale and offset. This is positioning. Okay, so I've shown you three really significant elements. So there's transparency or display mode. There are the views where you're going to put the imagery. And there is the positioning of those views, of those images in the view. So if you're writing notes, that's the header I would be giving this. I would say display mode, views, and positioning. And then I'm going to walk you through, first off, positioning. Second off, how to create these views yourself. And display mode we've already kind of looked at, but I'm going to cover that last in terms of grid size. So first, just so we can kind of see something in action, let's go to fill mode of 3. And fill mode of 3 means that the display is transparent. And now if I go into scale, I can start to, whoops, keep in mind which view I'm in. So we want to look at it from this side because this is the left and right view. And right view, mind you, is from this side. It's basically accounting for me looking at it from different views, different sides. But this is the easiest. So if you increase the scale, it's pretty obvious what happens, and you can definitely see it in comparison to the other image which has not had its scale adjusted. It just scales. So what do you think horizontal offset's going to do? You go this way with your cursor, you're going that way with your image. You go this way, it goes the other way. These are totally independent of each other in terms of the front has its own set of sliders, left and right has its own. Okay, we can go into vertical offset, so it goes down and it goes up. It's designed to be as flexible as possible so that you can use images from all different sources. And that's also why that grid does that really weird thing of just, you know, needing a model to be in edit mode. This way you can have a ton of grids and just swap them out real fast. Angle. Anybody want to take a guess at what angle does? It's one of those things where I don't think they had the name quite right, but it's important to kind of start to think like they do. So Michael said perspective, and I think that's actually quite realistic. In fact, wouldn't it be cool if there was a perspective slider that allowed you to alter the image based on what you consider to be its perspective? Mathematically 100% possible. And Michael, if I was you, I would patent that before ZBrush does it. But all it does is rotate. Why they didn't call it rotate? I don't know. But you know, they do so many awesome things that I'm not going to begrudge them the naming of a of a simple slider. How many of these sliders do you think they had to invent? Okay. Now, there's some controls in here that allow you to do different things, and this is pretty much the way it always is with the Pixologic and these interface items. There are the sliders, and then there are these buttons that just perform certain modifications. If you ever want to know about them, you can just move your cursor over them and press Control. So P line is pressed. ZBrush will project an X-axis line from the brush icon to the same grid. Yeah? Okay. Do you see how that works? If it's off, I don't get that line that goes to the image. And what's cool is you can turn that off, front view, back view, just to keep the complexity simple. Okay, what about 1? Okay, 1 may be a little bit more, how do I say it? It's probably only showing, in fact, there you go, some clipping. Okay, switch. It's going to be real straightforward. Just going to switch these maps out. Okay, flip. Whichever map you've got selected, can flip that map. So it's all real straightforward. Boom, 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 boom. Inverse. Nice. Okay. All right, now how do you get these guys in? So I showed you the positioning elements. Now how do you get an image in here? How do you swap them out and make them something else? Let's come up, let's take a look at our front and back view. That's kind of nice. Crop the width, adjust, export it, all of that. Let's start with a brand new screen, brand new setup. Let's go into Lightbox. I'm going to go into Projects. I'm just going to go into a default sphere. Don't save changes. Okay, and see, if I click these buttons, map to, it pulls up this interface. It allows me to kind of choose these different images. So let's say front and back, this is going to be my front view. I can go down to left, right, click it, and we can turn on, let's say, this other texture. This model is still in edit mode. I have the move brush on, so I can be moving this around, pushing and pulling as needed. But I don't know if you've noticed, this model seems a lot smaller than those grids. Let's start setting that grid back down to 1. And I'm going to undo those modifications I did, turn perspective off, and there you go. So grid size was in a default setup, a default project, so it's stored within this project itself, that grid size is set to 3. But this sphere itself is what's known as one ZBrush unit. Okay, chalk this up for later information. This is when we're talking about scaling and adjusting size models from Maya to Max to ZBrush. This is really important. One ZBrush unit is basically ZBrush's primary measurement. How do I say it? It's everything gets scaled according to one ZBrush unit. In ZBrush, you are not in real-world coordinates. That's not the way that it's working. Inside of ZBrush, you are working inside of ZBrush units. That's how it's been able to do everything that it does and has done through the years, is it does not work with an infinite amount of space. It works within the ZBrush space. It defines it so that it does its calculations the way it wants to do them. And those units are really here. You know, it's grid size allows you to adjust them. You could say set this grid to 1, set the tiles. Let's see if this will work. Set the tiles to 8. You can use these tiles as markers for measurement. Okay, there should be 16 because it'll go up, down in these directions. 8, 8, but I can't remember, so let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes. So 8 in all directions, which accounts for 16 by 16. That's another really important thing to know about their math. Usually they're dividing it so that it's in quadrants because they have to do their math according to multiple dimensions. Okay, so real simple to do there, but let's say you want to get an image off of, let's say, Pinterest. Let me